Now, Heather, I understand that you are the current director of the Whiskey School at the Flatiron Room in Manhattan. So first of all, tell us about the Flatiron Room.
The Flatiron Room is a venue that provides a beautiful whiskey service for all who ask. We have 1,000 different whiskeys to choose from. We have guests from all over the world come in and explore our whiskey collection and take my classes on Tuesday nights.
Tell us about yourself. How did you grow up in a household that liked whiskey?
Well, I'm from a big Scottish-Irish family, so that will go without saying.
Have a little sip for whatever ails you, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can rub it on your gums when you're teething, dip your binky in it. Oh, you name it.
Now, Heather, can you explain the difference between, I told you that I'm a Scotch drinker, so what is the difference between Scotch, between whiskey, between bourbon? Are there some aspects they're all the same?
Whiskey is a distilled spirit made with water, yeast, and grain. Bourbon is whiskey. Scotch is whiskey. Irish whiskey is whiskey. There's Japanese, Canadian, French whiskeys now. It's a distilled spirit from water, yeast, and grain. It's all whiskey.
Okay. Now, I guess I'll admit that I like my Scotch with a dash of water, and I've been told that I'm doing something wrong there. It should either just be straight or on the rocks.
Not at all. I mean, I am very all about getting rid of this whiskey fundamentalism, this whiskey rules, this you must do it this way or that way. These are suggestions. You can drink your whiskey however you want to, especially if you're buying it. So if you like a little water in it, then by all means, add some splash of water in it. If you want a highball, throw some seltzer water in it. You want to make an old-fashioned, make an old-fashioned. You want it on the rocks, that's fine. Whiskey, the beauty of whiskey is that it's a dynamic spirit, and the fact is that all of these are great ways to drink it.
Now, I had a friend recently introduce me to single malt Scotch, and what a difference. How would you describe the differences? We have, single barrel, single malt, double barrel?
Well, single malt Scotch is a type of Scotch, okay? Blended Scotch is a type of Scotch, grain Scotch, but there is no type of Scotch called single barrel or double barrel. It's just a way that, let's take, for example, let's say you're a single malt Scotch maker. Single means one single distillery. Let's use Glenfiddich as an example. When the person who's making the whiskey, the master distiller or the blenders, all the people that work there, when they're ready to bottle their whiskey, if they want to bottle their single malt Scotch from one single barrel, then we call it a single barrel. That's where that word comes from. So single barrel isn't a type of whiskey. It's just essentially a type of bottling of a whiskey. So basically, it's a distiller has to make a lot of decisions when they walk up to a bunch of casks. Do we bottle it from the cask right to a bottle? That would be called a single barrel. Do we mingle all these casks together? That would be a batching or a vatting. It's only a blended Scotch when you start blending distilleries. There's about 107 distilleries in Scotland.
107 in Scotland?
Yes, there's 107 distilleries churning out single malt Scotches. So you'll know them by their names: Macallan, Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, Highland Park, Laphroaig, Glenmorangie, Balvenie, on and on and on.
Right. Yeah, Macallan's my favorite. Now, if we have someone listening who is curious about this, where would you suggest that they start with whiskey? What should their first whiskey be?
Well, my big suggestion, if you're really interested in whiskey, is to get a friend, go to a bar, and one of you asks for a bourbon, and one of you asks for a single malt Scotch. And you're both going to nose, meaning you're going to smell the aromatics, have a taste, see how it feels around, it bounces around your mouth, what the finish is, and very, very quickly, I promise, you will be sitting there thinking to yourself, I like the bourbon better, or I like the Scotch better. And there's your first step towards whiskey appreciation, knowing your palate.
Now, did you say you give classes in whiskey drinking?
I do. I give nosing and tasting and appreciation classes on Tuesday nights. Normally we drink and we taste. We don't do big pours. It's a sampling. But we'll do a single malt Scotch, as you say. We'll do a blended Scotch like Johnny Walker. We'll do an Irish whiskey like a Tullamore Dew or a Bushmills. We'll taste a rye or a bourbon like a Four Roses bourbon or some of the craft bourbons. We'll taste a Japanese whiskey. So we go through the whole big whiskey-producing regions and start exploring them.
And if you can't make a class, of course, the new book is Whiskey Distilled, A Populist Guide to the Water of Life. Now, why is whiskey spelled differently? I see even you have the E in parentheses here.
Absolutely, and me putting that whiskey in the E in parentheses is a nod to saying to the readers in America, I'm talking about American whiskey, but it's also a nod to readers who love Scotch, who do not spell whiskey with an E, that I'm also talking to them. So these are two different spellings and two different kinds of whiskey. So for me, it was important to be able to show the reader that you're going to learn about all of them in this book.
I was just curious. Now, I've taken classes where you find out about wines and different things, and a lot of times they talk about the age of the wine. Does the age really come into matter whenever you're talking about whiskey?
Absolutely, it matters because your whiskey will change over time. Here's where it differs with wine. Wine ages in a bottle, whiskey ages in a cask. So the second you take whiskey out of the cask, it stops aging. And that number you see on a bottle, if they decide to put the number on it, is a promise to you that nothing in that bottle is less than, say, 12 years old or 6 years old or 21 years old. So the second it comes out of a cask, it stops aging. It doesn't mean that you're going to like an older whiskey better. It just means that the more time it's spent in the cask, the more flavors of wood you're getting into your whiskey. And sometimes you like a young whiskey is really delicious. Bourbons tend to be younger than Scotches. And a lot of young Scotch, which is about, more like a 12-year-old is young, are really delicious. They just have different flavor profile that are being delivered. In the wine world, for example, champagne is usually enjoyed at a younger age. Does it mean that red wine's better than champagne because you can drink an old one? Not necessarily. It's just all about style.
Now, some people will pair their foods with certain wines. Do we do the same with a whiskey or a Scotch or a bourbon?
Yes. In fact, on Saturday night, I just did a 5-course James Beard dinner at the James Beard Foundation House with Chef Susan Burdian, who is the chef at the Flatiron Room in Manhattan. And she created a 5-course whiskey dinner that we paired with whiskey, and it was delicious. We had a very happy guest.
Well, Heather, if I didn't do the morning show, I would raise a glass of Macallan 12-year-old too. Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right?
Absolutely.